Hey guys, head over here at FICMRepair. Repair. So we have a question here from this gentleman who lives in North Dakota. Obviously a very, very, very cold place where negative 40 degrees Fahrenheit, Celsius. Oh yeah, it's the same. Holy crap, cold. But he's writing saying, hey, I'm debating between the 320 and the 370. In a following comment, he says he doesn't have a plow or anything. I would tell you to save your money. The 320 is going to be just fine. Recognize that at hot idle, these two alternators only have a 5 amp difference. So 220 versus 225 amps at hot idle, where you don't even care. At cold idle, the 320 has 250 amps at cold idle versus the 370 has just a tiny smidge more than that, right? It's like, instead of 250, it's like 260. Now, in both cases, though, that's more than the 230 amp draw that the glow plugs are running with anyway. And it's not like when it's negative 40 out that you're starting your truck and putting your blower motor on high, because you don't want to freeze even more than you already are. So there's no additional amperage draw against the truck. And as a result, I would say I'd feel badly selling the 370. I think you're wasting your money. Apply that towards the cabling, whatever. And then just make sure that you use some of that electrically conductive grease in the process, right? Now, for those of you watching this video, if you were in a situation where all of a sudden you are running extra accessories like you're winching or whatever, recognize now there is a sizable difference. So what you do is you get the high idle mod, and with the high idle mod, and all of a sudden you flip a switch, and now you're idling at 1100 RPM instead of just 650 RPM, and the idle amperage numbers, there is an absolute difference between these units. And so now all of a sudden at idle, the 220 number on the 320 amp alternator, the 220 becomes closer to like 290, and the 370 becomes closer to like 350. And so those extra 60 amps at 1100 RPM, that could make a difference for you depending on what you got going on. But just because you have a 5,000 watt inverter or whatever else doesn't mean that you're plugging in 5,000 watts to it. If you're just charging your laptop, and you happen to have a 5,000 watt inverter doing the job, that's not justification here, right? Or if you've got, a 4,000 watt audio system, again, just because it's a 4,000 watt amplifier or set of amplifiers doesn't mean you're actually pulling 4,000 watts. And so what are you actually pulling? Let's go ahead and size it for that and sell you what you need, not what you think you need, and just have a little bit of money conscious, conversation in our head with this as you decide what path you want to go. For car stereo amps, recognize the way to figure this out is to take the actual amps of the unit and divide that by 13.5 volts. So if 1,000 watts divided by 13.5 volts, as an example, 1,000 watts, right? Divided by 13.5 volts divided by 2, because you're not listening to test tones, you're listening to hip hop or something, right? Or some, heavy bass, whatever. But it's not going to exceed a 50% duty cycle. And use that number over and atop the OEM sized alternator to determine, hey, how many amps does this alternator reasonably need to be doing to not drain my batteries down if I'm thumping and I'm just thumping at idle. And so that's how you kind of figure it out, okay? Also recognize with car stereo, very specifically car stereo, a tremendous number of amplifier companies, they're they're just liars, right? Oh, here's your 4,000 watt amp. And you look at it, it's only got, it's only got fuses in there for like, 50 amps, and you're like, no, no. So if you have a clamping ammeter, do that. Put the clamping ammeter on that power lead and, put it to thump and see how many amps that thing's actually drawing and use that as a metric. If you don't, what you can do is you can use 80% of the combined value of the fuses in the amp to figure it out, to say, okay, yes, if there's 100 amps worth of fuses, for example, very reasonably that amplifier is not going to pull any more than 80 amps in normal practice, and so you can just size it based upon that. So I hope this helps somebody. FICMRepair.com. We're all in this together, and recognize that if he did have a plow or something, the number of amps it takes to pick up a plow varies by plow manufacturer. So you can find the spec sheets on that and figure that out and say, okay, how much of this do I want to cover? But recognize that what's covering that draw initially anyway is not the alternator, it's the batteries, because the cycle time to get your plow from on the ground to full raised position is going to be less than a second, and so those electrons are going to pull from the alternator way faster than the regulator is going to see that voltage drop to be able to survive. But survive? Yeah, you understand. But at any rate, it's through continued plow raises, continued plow raisers, where the alternator is pushing all that current in already. It's already energized. It's already activated, and that's when it's like, okay, yeah, now the plow has to keep, the alternator has to keep up with the batteries. You're not depleting your batteries. So if you turn on your music and your headlights are dancing to the music, right? They're dimming when that's going on. That's a problem. Ditto with your plow. If you're plowing all night long, your commercial plow operation, right, and you're putting like 12, 14 hours on at a time, and all of a sudden your lights are starting to dim, that's a solid indication that your alternator is too bloody small, or you need to wire in an additional battery, but probably your alternator is just too bloody small, and that'd be the better way and the cheaper way to go anyway from a long-term perspective. All right? So great question. Appreciate you so much. FICMRepair.com. We're all in this together. Thank you.